Hey everyone, it's Alex. We have an absolutely massive balance update here in Marvel Snap, and a lot of it is in reference to the prior update where they nuked a whole bunch of tech cards, and now we have the result, and we're seeing what they've decided to revert and what they've decided to keep and what they've decided to change, because there's a couple instances of each. First of all, we're going to be starting with what was reverted back. And a lot of these were kind of what we predicted. Being reverted back, we have Killmonger being reverted back, Shadow King, Alioth, Red Guardian, and Cosmo. Their effects still remain consistent, except now they're getting their base power back. Killmonger's ability was drastically changed, I guess is the exception here. But it's back to normal and now wipes out the entire board at the same power. Shadow King's a 2-2 from a 3-3. 6-9, Alioth is back from 6-6. Red Guardian has its 2 power back, it's a 3-2. And Cosmo is now back to a 3-3. These have been reverted. It looks as though whatever statistics that were being gathered from the likes of Second Dinner, it basically called for these getting reverted back. Now, it's kind of sad. I think that the Killmonger change makes sense, but we saw some opportunities for Zoo to do particularly well. Even in Deadpool's Diner, Zoo was a very viable deck, and it was a very viable deck without Killmonger. And I don't think it ever really took over the meta though. So while Killmonger certainly is an anti-Zoo card, it looks as though perhaps the Zoo archetype could use a little bit of love, because even without Killmonger, it didn't necessarily pop off. But that's a whole other conversation. Talking about the changes that they've either kept or modified. So Shang Chi, as I suggested on the podcast, was going to, I think, get one or the other. The original read of Shang Chi was a 4-3 that read, on reveal, destroy all enemy cards here that have 10 or more power. What they decided to do was reduce it to only a single card here, and this is what's remaining. So the imbalance patch was basically a 4-2 with this ability. They gave Shang-Chi its power back, so it's still a 4-3. However, it reads, on reveal, destroy an enemy card here that has 10 or more power. So once again, it's only a single card, which is extremely impactful in certain situations, particularly for some Surtur decks, which tend to play larger cards. Like you often play Scar on top of a Crossbones or whatever. It's also worth noting that there's locations like Nadolvalir, which I still don't know how to say correctly, Muir Island and stuff like that, which tend to automatically prop things up past 10, where Shang-Chi felt like auto wins there. And so Shang-Chi is just less effective in that regard. Now, I did do the stats a little differently here. The win rate did go down on Shang-Chi, but not significant, because I do believe that it was often rare to hit more than one 10 power card for the most part. However, the meta share dropped significantly. We were literally seeing half of the amount of Shang-Chi than we were prior, given the changes. This might make Shang-Chi actually a better card to some degree, because people are not going to expect him as often. He's not just an auto-include in every single deck. And I guess we'll have to see what happens in the competitive realm of Snap, because it's likely that Shang-Chi will still be a very viable card despite this change, because as we can see from the win rate, yeah, the win rate went down a little bit. It's also worth noting that he lost a power there. So gaining the power back, I bet you his win rate remains the same, honestly. But his play rate being absolutely destroyed is one of those circumstances where maybe people just are turned off by the change, whereas realistically, the card is still going to be a very effective tech option to include in Marvel Snap. Now, Shang-Chi, I almost would have expected him to go to a 4-4 with this ability, by the way, but I think they're playing a little safe, because as you can see, it's the play rate that's important. It's not necessarily his win rate that is incredibly impactful. Now, with regards to some of the other cards, Negasonic they've decided to keep as was, as a 4-5. They do have a really kind of in-depth note here, which is worth reading for sure. But what's interesting about Negasonic is I think this is more of like a timeout, where they felt like the 3-3 Negasonic just was a little too good right now, and people had really dialed in onto using Negasonic in solid ways, and especially maybe even with initiative on turn 6, you can slide out a Negasonic with another 3-drop to have a very effective play. Now, it was a 53% win rate, and it dropped to 49%, and the meta share completely collapsed by 10% according to untapped-based statistics. This is a very sizable nerf. Does it take Negasonic out of the game? Maybe. We did see Juggernaut get the same treatment. However, Juggernaut has still remained in a couple decks, namely some of those Victoria Hand style decks, which are pretty popular right now. So it's possible that Negasonic remains viable and remains popular, but as of right now, I think this is a very significant nerf, likely harder than even the likes of Juggernaut, to be honest with you. Time will tell whether or not Negasonic recovers. Now, what was interesting about this was that Enchantress, going from a 4-drop to a 5-drop, it really did not feel like a nerf. And even in my time playing Surtur, which is, again, another deck that excelled with the tech apocalypse or whatever you want to call it, right? Because naturally Shang Chi wasn't present, and then, Killmonger wasn't present, so you guys saw Zoo and Surtur kind of gain in popularity. I was playing Enchantress in those decks. I was still going against a lot of like Cerebros and stuff, and Enchantress felt good. At a 5/8, it felt like a really solid card and a great option. It also diversified it from Rogue and some other options as well a little bit, because ultimately it felt like it had its own niche. Like it was serving its own purpose and it was doing a really good job at it. I actually liked Enchantress, and what's interesting is that the win rate actually went up and the meta share went up according to untapped based statistics. So it's entirely possible that this is a net buff as opposed to the original 4-drop Enchantress. And so Second Inner decided to keep it. It kind of makes sense. You do have a lot of ongoing strategies that are extremely high point getters. Like, again, Cerebro is one of the best actual point decks in the game, especially when you get the pop-offs of the Basts into the Mystique and the Cerebros and stuff, right? Like, it's crazy what you're able to do. So Enchantress being a 5/8, I'm okay with it because I think it's an important tech card and one that is worth having in the meta. All right, next we're going to talk about a bunch of nerfs that are coming down here, and I did not have Colleen Wing getting nerfed on my bingo card. Now, with that being said, we have seen Discard being relatively successful, especially the Khonshu versions of Discard, which saw success competitively at the Golden Gauntlet tournaments. And as a result, a lot of people are playing Discard, and I guess they felt like they had to take something off of it. And we saw Bullseye get impacted, in prior OTAs, and now it's Colleen Wing. He was always a really well-statted drop, but again, you're discarding a card from your hand and you have to have synergy there in order to not it being completely detrimental, right? And with Colleen Wing specifically, the targeted ability was appreciated because at the time, when kind of Marvel Snap first launched, Colleen Wing was one of the few straight up targeted discards alongside Lady Sif. Blade was a random card in your hand, Sword Master was a random card in the hand, and over time we've gained these targeted abilities. But mainly with Colleen Wing, what we've gained is the Bullseye and Scorns and stuff like that, which allows Colleen Wing to kind of punch above her weight class. Because when you amplify the number of swarms in your deck, that is just ammunition for the likes of a Bullseye. Moreover, Colleen Wing is a very reliable hit for the Shard from Dawkin. So it's a great enabler, but it's not really the straight up points getter. It's not being used that often as an enabler for the largest point totals in Marvel Snap's discard archetype. And it feels like they wanted to target something in the archetype, so they took it down to a 2/3, which is probably fine. Does this hurt discard? A little bit. I mean, every point of power matters. We've all lost games by 1 in tiebreaker and stuff like that. But I honestly don't think this does that much. I think this is a very modest take on nerfing discard. A bigger hit would have been nerfing Khonshu in some way, or even Bullseye again, or the Dawkin, or something like that. Colleen Wing is a very modest approach to these nerfs, especially since it's enabling much larger combinations and larger kind of doses of power. But overall, we'll have to see what happens. I think that Colleen Wing and discard is a good thing for the meta. I think that these are good cards. I don't think that having too much discard is necessarily a bad thing right now. I don't even see it that much. It's just general interest. In terms of top 10 statistic decks and stuff, it's doing really well. It has been near the top before, but it's not oppressive. You know what I mean? So I don't think that targeting discard is necessary per se. Although if they want to be on the safe side, I think that Colleen Wing going down to a 2/3 does make sense, considering all the additional tools that discard's gotten over the last little bit. Then we go to Agatha Harkness. This goes back to something I said a long time ago. I said that one of the worst things that can happen to a card in Marvel Snap is that they suddenly get played. Because when they suddenly get played, they get nerfed. And this is what we're seeing with Agatha Harkness. Now, with that being said, in comparison to the Colleen Wing and discard, the Agatha decks are performing significantly better than those. Agatha decks have been, without question, one of the best decks in Marvel Snap over the last couple of months, specifically when Redshift came out. The Redshift Agatha Harkness decks, whether it's the ones that use Black Knight or just straight up Hela, have been really, really good, stupid good. And so taking some power off Agatha makes sense, especially since you are seeing Ghost Rider plays with Agatha, you're seeing Hela plays with Agatha. It's just too consistent. Redshift gave Agatha way too much viability. And as a result, taking 2 power off of her does make a lot of sense. So it is a tricky card. I still don't like that it absorbs all the boosters, by the way. But I love the design. I do love Agatha. I think it's a really fun deck, and I'm okay with it. But when I'm playing against Hela, and when they put that Black Knight on the field of play, I'm like, damn, I'm so dead. And they snap, I'm gone, right? And it's one of those things where it's you're not going to win that battle. But I do think there's a lot of risks in the deck too, and most modern versions are running Corvus Glaive, and you can actually straight up discard your Hela and your Ghost Rider, for instance, and then you're kind of up the creek without a paddle, as they like to say. So I do think there's some nuance with these decks. I don't think that they're like oppressive, but they have been overperformers. So I think that this nerf is justified. We'll have to keep an eye on Agatha. And then we go to Stardust. Now this is a card that honestly, I actually don't really like that much. I don't play Stardust. It's not a tech card that I like including. It feels like it has the echo effect where people just really don't pay attention to Stardust at all. Like they see the card drop and they still try to play their Broods or they play their Doomers and they do all those things, right? But stats don't lie. It is running a 54.5% win rate according to untap-based statistics at a 5% meta share. The meta share is not the problematic part. It's the win rate part. And they have felt that it's been overperforming, which surprises me because I feel like I barely see Stardust. And if I do, I think the types of decks I'm playing, it feels like a non-factor for the most part. So I was kind of surprised with this nerf. I don't know if Stardust actually warranted it or not. I'd be interested in your thoughts here. Is Stardust just kind of like a low-key, underappreciated card that's doing better than we thought? I mean, statistically would support that, right? But for me, like I just didn't see this as an issue. I would not have had this on my bingo card, but maybe that's just the pocket meta I'm in. I'm just not seeing lots of Stardust, and maybe at different MMR brackets, Stardust is more prevalent. I'd be interested in your thoughts. And this also brings to question another thing we've talked about in the past. What's your criteria for nerfs? Is it excessive play rate? Is it excessive win rate? And it's obviously a mix between the two, naturally, but for the purpose of discussion, I don't feel like Stardust was a meta problematic card, despite the fact that according to Untapped, we do see some elevated win rates. So they are bringing it down here. I don't know if this was quite necessary though, but I'm open for it. I do understand why they are perhaps trying to be a little safer with some of the tech cards in Snap, especially the ones that might not, might have a negative impact on the meta, because Stardust does hit a ton of different cards. Like it is a very wide net, where it can definitely have a very negative impact if it gets a little too strong. And now we're off to some buffs. We got 6 buffs in total, and the first is going to be to the Season Pass card, Viv Vision. Now, this is something that I believe I spoke about on the podcast with one of the guests. And Viv Vision has felt like okay, and that kind of rates with the 50% win rate it's had thus far. But for a Season Pass card, especially when Second Contender wants to make those greenbacks, it's probably on the weaker side. But in their defense, I think they were right to assume that a 3-3 Viv Vision is a significant upgrade over a 3-2. Now, naturally, it's Alex, there's one extra point. But much like cards like Gladiator and others that really use their power as a source of snowballing their effect, Viv Vision's extra power is not insignificant because it helps proc the effect. It helps to win that location that she's trying to challenge. And as a result, it's a double dip on that power. This is a much more significant buff than just, an extra 1 point on another card, whatever, right? Do I like it? I think I'm okay with it. I think I'm okay with this. Viv Vision, especially as a card that I love playing in Surfer. So hey, it's a Surfer buff, okay? So take what I say with a grain of salt here. I'll take this. I do like Viv Vision. I think the design is really cool. I think that the buffing across the hands if you win the location is fair. I think it encourages some interesting deck design for Surfer. Like, I still love my Vivican deck, like with Wiccan Vision, Wiccan and Viv Vision. Like, I think that's really cool. I've always enjoyed playing that, and I think that it provides a lot of versatility as to how I design those decks, depending on the meta. So yeah, I'm all for this. I think that this is a fair buff, and I do think Second Dinner needs credit. They could have just released it at 3-3 and left it probably broken, right? Sold more season passes and, went down that road. And instead they tried to be conservative here. And perhaps, listen, they have their faults. They create their own L's like 90% of the time. But this is one of those circumstances where they were conservative. And I think that ultimately, they made the right call buffing it. So we'll have to see. And they also buffed it while it's still in the season pass. So if you're the type of person that's short on tokens but doesn't mind spending $10 on a card, then you still have that option. Just like in the future, if they're going to nerf a card, nerf it before it's gone, right? Like if you're going to nerf it, don't nerf it after everyone spends their tokens on it. You know what I mean? Using this last week as like a judgment call on these season pass cards, I think is fair. Okay, I think it's fair. So anyways, I'm okay with Viv Vision going to a 3-3. Then we have Dormammu. I'm less okay with this one, and I'll explain why. So first of all, you have a 7-10 going to a 7-12. It's a significant power buff, right? The only thing with Dormammu is I don't feel like power was necessarily the problem. Now, power solves all problems at the end of the day in Marvel Snap. Like, I understand this, right? But going from a 2 extra power on Dormammu, like I felt like I was getting very large Dormammus. I don't know, whatever. I'm getting very large Dormammus. And as a result, I don't feel like power was ever the problem. I felt like it was the cadence by which it was played. I felt like it was the way you start with the rituals. It was the ritual movements that I felt were somewhat problematic. And so I think that if they cannot figure out a way to make Dormammu work from a power perspective, I think they need to take a look at the rituals and see how they can make the rituals a much more enjoyable, straightforward experience. Now, at that being said, I don't think Dormammu's rituals are problematic. I found it relatively easy to get through the rituals and get the effects off. The problem is the cards that you often want to destroy, they're not the ones that you can't destroy a Wolverine or a Deadpool because they don't actually get destroyed. They're regenerative. So as a result, you're often destroying things, and then the play lines are very different. And I think that first ritual, I'm not saying it should destroy something on its own, but I think it's the ritual cadence that might be the problem with Dormammu, not necessarily the power, because the power's always been there in my opinion. It's the destroy cadence, the ritual cadence. So I'm interested in seeing how this works, because I do think Dormammu is a really cool card, but admittedly, I would rather just play Moira. Like, I'd rather play Moira X this card, and in my testing, I find that Moira X and Dormammu are non-compatible because you're getting replicated rituals. If they changed Moira to not replicate the ritual, then all of a sudden they work better. But replicating the rituals, I think, is an issue because Moira, you're going to stuff your hand and you're not going to draw cards, and it's not the right way to play Dormammu. And so as a result, we'll have to see what happens with this buff. It's worth considering, but I don't know if this changes enough. And then we have Destroyer. Destroyer going from a 6/16 to a 6/18. This is a Destroyer, I was going to say War Machine. I can't even remember. Is it Warpath? I can't remember the guy's name. The guy who gets buffed when you're only playing in 2 locations. I can't even remember his name. That's how body it is. Yeah, this is a bot buff going from a 6/16 to a 6/18. And they did change Destroyer significantly. It used to destroy everything on the board. Now it destroys things at other locations. Still possible synergies with like Nimrods and some of those destroy shells that want to do like blanket powers and just kind of get things kind of popping off. But Destroyer's always been bad. It's just always been bad, especially since they've reworked it. So as a result, I think that this is a very low risk buff that's worth giving to a classic card from Series 3 that sees almost no play. It is an inventive card. It's an interesting card. And so I do think that at 18 power, like, it's a lot of power, and I'm sure that if people want to start cooking with Nimrod Destroyer shells again, now would be the time. Our next set of buffs have all to do with Yocasta coming out next week. I mean, not one of them. There's 3 buffs we're talking about here, and one of them is not, but the other 2 are activates, and Yocasta is going to enjoy being in decks with them, and one of them is Awesome Andy. That might have been one of the most awkward kind of transition segments I've ever done, but anyways, we'll move on. Awesome Andy goes from a 2/1 to a 2/2, and this felt obvious. Like, this card was garbage, even on preview. I'm like, this card sucks. Everyone said this card sucked. 2/1 that gives +2 power, like, in theory, is not bad. It's not good enough though, man, especially with what we've seen at 2 drops. Awesome Andy never stood a chance. Like, it was never at 2/1 going to be worth playing. Now it's a 2/2 that gives +2s. Okay. Now we're talking, especially since Yocasta's coming out as well, so it does give Jocasta. I still don't know how to say the name probably. Every time I say either Yocasta or Jocasta, someone corrects me and says I'm saying it wrong, but mentions the other way. So I'm still confused. And now that I said that, it's the same argument. It's going to happen in this comment section. But anyway, so we have Awesome Andy. It needed the buff. The card sucked. We go Lockjaw. Now here's an interesting take here. I think the Lockjaw probably didn't need this buff because the Lockjaw was actually seeing play in the Agatha Hella decks, but they just nerfed Agatha, so giving Lockjaw a bit of power here, it's a little bit of an offset thing. The thing is like, maybe, I don't want to say this because it's not going to work, but like, does Lockjaw in this new version with the Jocasta, does it bring back Beta Ray Bill? Does it bring back Beta Ray Bill? I am curious about it, man. I would like to play a Beta Ray Bill, Yocasta, Thor deck. The only problem is I think the costs are as such that you can't do it all. Like, there's just too much there, right? So anyways, I really do like these changes, but I don't know, man. I was one of the ones that actually kind of liked the OG Lockjaw. And ever since they changed Lockjaw, like, I understood why, because Lockjaw Thanos and even some other stuff that was happening, it was just too much. Lockjaw Hello was stupid. Like, the original Lockjaw was a very problematic design. And so this one here, it feels kind of boring. It's still kind of cool, though, because, like, the activate gives you a little bit of control. But I don't know if, like, activating Yocasta into Lockjaw if that's ever going to be actually worth it. You know what I mean? It does have some added versatility because you can swap any location. You used to have to only play on Lockjaw, right? But we'll see. I think this is worth considering. 2-3 Lockjaw. He's been so far out of the meta for a while, even though he's kind of making a comeback with those Agatha Hella decks. So we'll have to see if it makes that much of an impact. This is a really interesting change. I think they could have gone further with this. However, it's worth noting that taking Mystique from a 3-0 to 3-1 still leaves it synergistic with Ravonna. And Ravonna Mystique decks I think are kind of cool, despite the fact I've not played them in a long time. I kind of want to all the time, but I'm like, man, if I just did a Ravonna deck, I think it'd be good. Yeah, whatever. That's a whole other conversation. Also, Shadow nerf to Mr. Negative, right? Now Mystique's going to cost energy, but the only thing is like, even if Mystique is inverted and you have an OG Iron Man, it's still 6 energy, turn 6. And then you're able to play Iron Man in the Mystique, even if, it's still 6 energy. Also, most of those games go to 7. It's probably not that much of a nerf, honestly, for Negative. But overall, I do think Mystique could use a little bit of love. It's been one of those cards where, like, obviously, it's an amazing card. It has a very, very high ceiling. Does this make Cerebro 1 better? No. Don't play Cerebro 1. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate every one of you guys. You guys mean the world to me. Be sure to hit that like button to support the content, and double check while you're there that you are subscribed. Love you guys, and we'll see you on that next one.